Hi, I'm Maria Lloyd with Your Black Women as well as idaydaily.com. And today I'm having a really exciting conversation with two of my favorite people. They are the authors of 101 Ways to Make Money in Africa. Their names are Dr. Harnet and John-Paul. And today we're going to have a really interesting conversation because, as you guys know, with the Super Bowl, people are frustrated talking about Beyonce and her very public and unapologetic stand supporting the Black Panther Party, as well as a lot of social justice issues that affect Black Americans. So what better time than now to discuss ways in which we can actually conduct business outside of America, considering that when we do show or exude pride in ourselves, there's an issue. So, Dr. Harnet, how are you?
I'm very well. Thanks, Maria. Good to be back.
Yes, very happy to have you guys back. And John-Paul, how are you?
Great, great, great. Always a pleasure to be having this conversation every time, anytime.
Likewise. Likewise. So thank you both for joining me as usual. I praise you guys. I sing you guys praises all the time because I absolutely love that book, 101 Ways to Make Money in Africa. And for those of you who have, seen us have conversations on the Financial Juneteenth YouTube channel, you guys know that, Dr. Harnet and John-Paul have been instrumental in kind of guiding Black Americans into how to create businesses in African nations. So today we're going to elaborate a little bit more as we talk about oil. Obviously oil prices have crashed in many experts' eyes. And so with Nigeria being one of the main hubs over on the African continent with oil, there have been some concerns that perhaps Africa is not the continent to conduct business. So we're going to try to discuss that and dispel some of those misconceptions and rumors and kind of elaborate on that. So I'm actually going to start with John-Paul, who is actually in Lagos, Nigeria right now. And John-Paul, can you kind of tell us, what should we be concerned about the oil crisis or not?
Okay, on one hand, we should be concerned. On another hand, we should be excited this is happening. Because for generations, Africa has been looked upon as that continent that supplies the world with commodities, with raw materials, be they iron ore to solid minerals, especially oil. So in Africa, you have countries that feature in the top 10 in terms of world producers of oil. There's Nigeria, there's Algeria, there's Angola, and for generations too, Africa has been made lazy because of oil. I like to call it the easy money. You just go there, dig a hole in the ground, and then get a thing out, and then that's money. So, especially my own country, Nigeria, the other sectors, even agriculture. There's this funny thing I like to say. The color of our flag is green, white, green. This came up in the 1960s, and this country was built on agriculture. The same with many other countries in Africa. A lot of them take pride in the agriculture that built their economies. And then oil came in the late 60s and 70s, and everybody departed from oil. So if you really look at the nature of our economy, my flag shouldn't be green, white, green. It should be like black, white, black or something, because we still import a lot of food. Our mainstay is crude oil, same across the continent. So right now we have a situation where oil is not bringing in as much easy money as it should. Are we suffering for it? I wouldn't say a lot of people. I would say maybe the top politicians and those business people who have significant interest in the oil sector are the worst hit. The interesting thing that's going on now is that non-oil sectors, IT, agriculture, retail, education, a lot of interesting sectors that didn't have the limelight because of this goo called oil are now getting the attention. Governments, for once, have started to focus on other areas and ways to, diversify the economy, as it were. So this is a great time for the continent because before, if you look at Africa, you just see it as a commodity-rich continent. But there is much more to us than oil. And interestingly, this calamity, as it were, the low crude oil prices, have provided the best platform for us to see the richness in the non-oil sectors. And as we go forward in this conversation, I hope we'll be able to touch on a few of these non-oil sectors, industries that hold tremendous opportunities for Africans themselves and entrepreneurs and investors in the diaspora who are interested in investing in the continent, especially agriculture. And I'm hoping I'll be able to touch more on that as we go forward.
Okay, perfect. Dr. Harnet?
Yes, I absolutely agree with what John-Paul has said so far. And I think it is a problem if you generalize always too quickly. You know, there's Africa is the hopeless continent, and then it's the hopeful continent, and then it's the rising continent, and it's the not rising anymore continent. So there will be, of course, dynamics always. And it cannot be just on an upward trend without any dynamics. So to see certain stagnation, or to see that the growth is not continuing in some markets as fast as it has been, I think it's normal. That's part of being part of the global community as well. Now, what we have to understand is that the economic slowdown or the drop in oil prices really just affects those markets in Africa that are heavily depending on oil or other minerals. So Nigeria has been badly affected, Angola, Zambia, South Africa also, to maybe not because of oil, but because it is much more included in the global economy than the rest of Africa. So it has been affected as well. But what we should not forget is that at the same time, a lot of African markets were rising, and these or continued to grow over the last couple of years. And these are the markets that are not depending on oil or mineral resources. So, for example, Kenya, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and in fact, to say it here, Ethiopia has been the fastest growing economy in the world.
Wow.
And therefore, it is very, very important that we always not look at Africa as a whole, but see the different levels on which markets are at the moment. And and I agree with John-Paul that this is actually good news for Africa, because it urges African leaders to step away from those commodities and invest in sectors that are very, very important to the continent. And you can do the same.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you so much for the great information. So I kind of want to ask you guys, and this is going to deviate just slightly from the conversation, but as I opened up this video, I discussed this, controversy, if you will, surrounding Beyonce's performance at the Super Bowl. Now, Dr. Harnet, I know you and I discussed this briefly offline, but I'm really curious to hear you all's thoughts as people of the African diaspora. How do you feel about, or what suggestions do you have for Black Americans? Because again, whenever we exude pride in our heritage, whenever we are expressing that our lives matter, it always causes some type of friction or some type of controversy amongst, our white counterparts. And so, in my opinion, this, to me is just even more of a reason why we should consider building and networking with those who are outside of the United States. So what suggestions do you have about how Black Americans can kind of deal with this? It's what seems like a perpetual state of combat where we're always fighting to prove our worth and our relevance. What suggestions do you have as someone who's in the diaspora but not living in the United States?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important question, and I will try to give it a very honest answer. So first of all, what Black Americans, especially those of African descent, but probably also those who have moved to America, are going through is we're not very familiar with that kind of racism or the issue of feeling constantly excluded on such a level, for example, in Europe. So I only became aware of it since I have been dealing much more with communities in the United States. So I've lived in London, for example, for 13 years. And although things like Black History Month and the Black Heritage are, the awareness is given to that, you don't see the issue of racial confrontation on a regular basis at all. But what I would like to say is that, injustice is still prominent across the world.
Right.
Be it in Africa and be it in Europe or America. Now, what I think is important is there needs to be a line between raising awareness about the injustice so it doesn't get covered up or buried somewhere. So the raising awareness is very, very, very important. You need a heightened awareness in order to change things. However, it should not, or one should not end up to constantly, as you said, fight it. Because when you fight something constantly, it's almost like you're reinforcing it. And you know what Socrates said? In order to fight the old, build something new. In order, to replace it with. So, and that's very, very important. So I see, for example, movements in America to support Black-owned businesses and for a new awareness among Black Americans to become entrepreneurs, be successful, get a greater understanding about finance, about investment, about entrepreneurship. And I think that's really the way forward, because that's an empowering way. You're gaining control, you're being empowered, you can empower others, you're getting also economically power in terms of being more respected, spending power if you are building companies. And that is really something where you, let's say, can rebuild or reposition yourself. And it takes time. Change always takes time, Maria.
Right.
It is a process, unfortunately. And I mean, who knows the process better than, Black Americans from slaves to freedom, or even Africans on the continent from colonialism to independence, and now from, a lot of authoritarian states now towards economic development. So it's a slow process. It's a process where it is very, very important that we engage ourselves. However, as I said, if you're just fighting the old and you're becoming frustrated and angry and you don't replace it with anything, then I think you can fall into your own traps, and that can be very, it can be, to hindrance to your own development, be it as a person or as a community. And so for that reason, looking at how to build your business, be it inside the United States or be it in Africa, I think is a very powerful way forward, and you can still make your stand.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much for that. John-Paul, what are your thoughts?
It's quite curious that this topic has come up, because it's not been up to 5 days since I finished this epic book by Nelson Mandela. That's The Long Walk to Freedom. That's his autobiography, and I was very shaken and moved, because the situation in Africa, in South Africa during the apartheid era, is very similar, even comparable to things that I see on the news, that from the U.S., about injustice and things like that around the Black community in the States. But I think that is one book everybody has to read, especially given the circumstances. But I digress. The most important thing here is, from what I have learned, and I think that book helped to consolidate that bias, is that there are three levels of freedom. So you have political freedom, there's economic freedom, and then there's cultural freedom. So the interesting one is actually this cultural one, because if even if you are free physically, and then in your mind you are still trapped by all these prejudices, just like Harnet said, trying to fight the old without reinventing yourself or coming up with something new, you are still caged, albeit in your mind. So I think there has to be some kind of cultural revolution, which will not happen alone, which would have to come with economic emancipation. More black people. I saw one very disturbing statistic that, young black men are 3 times more likely to end up in jail, unlike their counterparts. I actually think it's much higher. But then these are some of the things that the non-black community would always point at to say, these are the reasons why we have issues with this guy. So if young black people don't see a future beyond maybe crime or gangsterism and all those things that we see and hear in the news, and they start to aspire towards maybe entrepreneurship or everything that we're trying to promote here, then that's one level of people. They're definitely going to earn more respect, Then I know, yes, people would say, yes, Obama, the first black president and all that, but it's just a start. There's still a long way to go when it comes to political freedom for the black community in the US, albeit that the journey has started. But Obama does not in any way confirm that the black community in the States is totally or has total political freedom. If you still look at the membership of Congress and the Senate, look at the people who make policy in the US, how many of them actually are black people,
Right.
All of that comes with political power and stuff like that. But I really want to focus on the cultural. There has to be some kind of cultural revolution. If you like what Harnet said, in Europe, it's not this way. Black people in Europe don't face the same kind of racial biases and stuff like that. And there may just be a reason. It could be that the white community there was more embracing. It could be that they followed a totally different path, and then history has come to treat them better than their counterparts in the US or whatever it is. But black people cannot expect that people will just respect them and celebrate them and embrace them. Just like you have to create something, you have to earn it.
Right.
And I really must applaud people like Dr. Watkins and other people within that category that are very strong role models within the black community. There are people who you can point out and say, okay, not every black man has to be in jail, or not every black man has to be a dealer or something like that. We need more of this kind of people. We need more of this kind of people so that young black people can aspire to something beyond crime or something that is not going to help the community politically, economically, or culturally. We need more of those idols, not just for America, but Africans themselves need more of those idols, especially in the US, as it's one of the biggest economies in the world. So it's not just for Black America. It's also for Africa itself, because we see our brothers there as role models. If you're looking for some kind of evidence, all of the music here, the clothing here and everything is almost totally influenced by hip hop, which is like a strong movement, a strong cultural movement that has come out of the Black community. And then we have some very strong role models, but it's not enough. It's not enough.
Right.
We need more of that. So that the next time Beyonce comes out and then she's coming up with a song like this, people would actually celebrate it and not just say, why would you say something like that? If that same kind of song were released in Europe, I don't think it would have met with the same kind of reaction it did in the US. So yes, I think on these three grounds, politically, economically, and culturally, Black America needs to make significant advances in these areas.
Wow, such powerful words from both of you. I really appreciate that. It's really touching as someone who is in America right now. Sometimes I just feel overwhelmed. When I went to South Africa last year, I always tell people my first experience, once I stepped off the plane, I literally was so vindicated. I felt spiritually and physically lighter. I mean, I literally felt like I was floating as I was walking in the airport. And it's really tragic in a way, because it kind of revealed to me just how heavy the burden is of racism on Black people in this country. Every time I leave the United States, I feel happier. And of course, sure, it could just be me. It may just be my issue that I need to deal with, but I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of my peers who travel frequently and travel outside of the United States share these same sentiments. We all feel just really heavy and borderline depressed when it's time for us to come back to the United States. And I just think that it's just so tragic in a way. But what both of you have presented as, viable solutions to this problem, I think make great sense. And I'm happy to say that there are people like Dr. Watkins, as you mentioned, John-Paul, who are forging ahead despite, all of these attacks, if you will, from people who just don't get it and don't care to get the Black American struggle. So thank you both. I really appreciate you. And again, you guys, they are the authors of 101 Ways to Make Money in Africa. It's an amazing book. I bought it sometime last year. It was in 2014. I know we've known each other for a little while now, so I'm getting my years mixed up, but I read it really quickly. I'm not saying that I love it just because I'm here speaking with them now, but it really is a good book. It was very informative. It definitely kind of opened my eyes to the infinite opportunities in investing in, African nations. And again, I just feel like this is, what better time than now where we see how really there hasn't been a whole lot of progression from, the civil rights movement to today. So I think that we really, as a people, should start looking to building connections with, a Dr. Harnet or John-Paul, people who are outside of the United States, but still within the African diaspora, and really forming these alliances to just unite on a larger front. Because at the end of the day, as Dr. Harnet had already mentioned, an injustice is an injustice, and it happens all over the world. So if we all can unite and work together to fight these injustices, then I think that we'll have a much greater impact. So again, thank you both, Dr. Harnet and John-Paul, for your time today. And you guys, please check out their book, 101 Ways to Make Money in Africa. You can actually have a one-on-one consultation with them as well. So I'm going to make sure I add the link in the description so that you guys can do that. We've had several people leave us feedback saying that they really enjoyed their conversation with Dr. Harnet and John-Paul. So thank you again, you two.
Thank you, Maria.
And I know it's
Thank
late in the
you.
evening over there, so I won't hold you up any longer. And for those of you who are tuning in, thank you so much. Please just keep, checking out this channel and leave some feedback below if you have any questions. I'm sure Dr. Harnet and John-Paul and, of course, myself will be able to check the comments and answer any questions you may have. So thank you guys so much. Have a great day.